The next time I returned to the estate, I forced myself to walk tall, as though nothing had shifted. Mother greeted me with her usual poised smile, Mary with her daggered smirk. Back again, Mary teased as she led me through the foyer. What's this weekly inspections now? I shrugged, careful to keep my voice steady. I'm just doing what any responsible co-trustee would, making sure the estate remains in good hands. Mother's eyes lingered on me, too long, as though she were searching for cracks in my expression. But I held her gaze, let a faint smile play on my lips. Act normal. That was my shield now. We toured the gardens, the guest house, the kitchens. Mary rattled off details about new landscaping contracts, careful to emphasize how much she had overseen. I let her talk, nodding, jotting notes casually into my pad. Inside, though, every word she spoke fed the fire. When we circled back into the main house, Mother excused herself to take a phone call. Mary led me into the dining room, where invoices were stacked on the sideboard. She swept a few into a folder, almost too quickly. And that's when it happened. A slip. One sheet slid free before she shoved the folder shut. I caught only a glimpse, bold black numbers across the top, larger than anything I'd seen in their household accounts. The kind of figure that didn't belong to catering costs or plumbing repairs. When she noticed my eyes flick toward it, her smile froze for just a heartbeat. Then she smoothed it over. Old bills, she said lightly, sliding the paper deep into the folder. Nothing worth looking at. Too quick. Too defensive. And I knew right then, this wasn't just about misappropriated funds. There was something larger at play. That night, I called Daniel again. There's more, I whispered into the phone, pacing my kitchen. I saw figures, big ones. They're laundering more than just estate money, Daniel. I can feel it. Slow down, he cautioned. We can't jump to conclusions until we have evidence. Did you get a copy of the paper? I winced. No. She covered it too fast. Then we need a strategy. If those numbers were that high, it could mean hidden assets or worse, debts. If the estate's been leveraged without your consent, that's not just unethical. That's illegal. The word illegal stuck in my chest like ice. The next day, I visited the courthouse archives. It was a long shot, but if any liens or loans had been placed against the estate, they'd be filed there. And sure enough, after hours of searching, I found it. A loan document, signed 6 months after Father's death. The collateral? A portion of the estate land. The signature? Mary's. I sat frozen, the fluorescent lights buzzing above me. They hadn't just skimmed money. They had gambled with the land itself. The land Father had sworn would never be divided. The betrayal deepened into something uglier. Not greed alone. Desperation. That night, back home, I placed the loan document beside the transfer authorization I'd found earlier. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. But I couldn't shake the image of Mary's face when the paper slipped. That frozen smile, that flicker of panic. For the first time, I wondered if she wasn't just complicit. Maybe she was in over her head. Maybe this was bigger than both of them. And if that was true, then I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance anymore. I might be fighting for the estate's survival itself. I couldn't sleep that night. The loan document lay on my table, illuminated by the soft yellow glow of the kitchen lamp. I kept staring at the bank's name printed in bold across the top, Eldridge Financial Group. I'd never heard of it before, and that unsettled me more than if it had been one of the big banks. Because if my mother and Mary had gone to an obscure lender, it meant they hadn't wanted the paper trail to be obvious. It meant they were hiding more than just a loan. The next morning, Daniel came over. His hair was rumpled, his tie slightly askew, the telltale signs of a man who had been up most of the night thinking. He scanned the loan document, his mouth tightening. Eldridge Financial, he muttered. That's not a traditional bank. That's a private lending group. These types of firms don't hand out loans unless there's leverage. Serious leverage. They use the land as collateral, I said flatly. He nodded slowly. Which means if they default, Eldridge has the legal right to seize it. And if Eldridge is who I think they are, he trailed off. I leaned forward. Who are they? He hesitated, then said, groups like this operate in shadows. Wealthy investors, sometimes with political ties, sometimes worse. They thrive on families who are desperate enough to risk everything. If your mother and sister went to them, it's because they couldn't get legitimate financing. The words dropped like stones in my stomach. So this wasn't just reckless. It was dangerous. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the thought, who exactly had my family entangled themselves with? I remembered the dark sedan I'd seen near the gates. The way Mary's smile had faltered when that paper slipped. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. What if this wasn't just about greed anymore? What if they were being squeezed? That evening, I drove by the estate again. The sedan wasn't there this time, but as I slowed past the gates, I saw a figure leaving the front door. Not Mother. Not Mary. A tall man in a tailored suit, briefcase in hand. He moved with a certain precision, like he belonged in boardrooms, not on our family's front steps. He climbed into a black SUV and pulled away without looking back. I memorized the license plate, my pulse racing. Back home, I jotted it down in my notebook, circling it twice. Mother and Mary weren't acting alone anymore. They had opened the door to someone else. Someone who had their claws in deeper than I'd realized. Later that night, as I sat by the window with the documents spread around me, a thought hit me with chilling clarity. Father had always been cautious, meticulous with money. He had warned us countless times. Asterisk, once you let outsiders into family land, you never get them back out. Asterisk. And now, even from the grave, his warning echoed like thunder. Mother and Mary hadn't just betrayed me. They had betrayed him. They had betrayed the very legacy he spent his life building. I knew then that time was no longer on my side. This wasn't just about waiting and gathering evidence anymore. If Eldridge Financial had their hooks in, the estate could slip away before the courts ever saw a single piece of paper. And I wasn't about to let that happen. As I closed the files and locked them away again, I whispered into the empty room. They brought outsiders in, Father. But I swear, I'll get them out. Even if it meant tearing down every shadowy deal they'd made. Even if it meant facing whoever was really behind that black SUV. The next morning, I sat at my laptop with a mug of bitter coffee and typed Eldridge Financial Group into the search bar. At first, nothing much came up. A sleek website with stock photos of skyscrapers and handshakes, the usual glossy promises, tailored lending solutions, discreet partnerships, generational wealth strategies. It all looked professional. Respectable. Too respectable. The deeper I clicked, the thinner it felt. No staff bios. No client testimonials. Just vague statements wrapped in polished language. Like they'd been written to impress, not to inform. Which meant the real story wasn't online. It was hidden. I called Daniel. I need to know who Eldridge Financial really is. He sighed. Esther, you're wading into dangerous waters. Groups like this don't operate in daylight for a reason. Then we shine a light, I said. Because they've already set foot on my father's land. And I want to know exactly what we're up against. He was quiet for a long moment before agreeing to reach out to a colleague, a retired investigator who had handled financial crimes. Don't expect miracles, Daniel warned. But if anyone can dig where Google can't, it's him. That night, I couldn't help replaying the image of the man I'd seen leaving the estate. Tall, polished, unshakable. Not the kind of person who'd waste his time on small accounts. If he was there, Eldridge wasn't just circling. They were already feeding. 2 days later, Daniel called. His voice was low, urgent. My contact pulled some threads, he said. Eldridge Financial isn't just a private lender. They're a shell for a network of investors, some legitimate, some not. Their model is simple. Target families in transition. Estates in flux. They offer quick liquidity, then slowly tighten the noose with hidden terms, inflated interest, and penalties. I gripped the phone harder. So it's predatory. Predatory, yes. But worse, they don't just take assets. They consolidate power. Once they get a foothold, they maneuver until they own everything. And Esther, his voice dropped. They've ruined families bigger than yours. I swallowed, my throat dry. Who was the man I saw at the house? I asked. Daniel hesitated. If I had to guess, one of their advisors. A fixer. They send men like him when the deal is big enough that they want oversight. which meant the estate wasn't a small fish to them. It was a prize. That night, I sat in my darkened living room, staring out the window at the quiet street. The thoughts settled like iron in my chest. My fight wasn't just against Mother and Mary anymore. They had invited wolves to the table, and those wolves weren't going to leave willingly. I opened Father's old journal, the one I kept on my nightstand. His words felt heavier than ever now. Integrity is the only wealth that endures. Protect it, even when others sell it cheap. Tears blurred my vision, but I whispered back to him, I will protect it, even if I have to drag Eldridge into the light myself. But even as I said it, I knew I couldn't do it alone. If Eldridge was as ruthless as Daniel said, I would need allies, and I had no idea yet who I could trust. For days, I replayed Daniel's warning in my head. They've ruined families bigger than yours. It haunted me every time I pictured Father walking the estate, inspecting the orchards, running his calloused hands over the wooden railings like he was blessing the place. He had poured everything into that land, into us. And now it was sitting in the jaws of a predator. I knew I couldn't fight them from the outside alone. I needed eyes and ears inside the estate. Someone who saw more than they let on. The next time I visited, I made my presence seem casual. I laughed at Mary's barbed jokes, nodded along at Mother's little monologues about responsibility, and pretended like I hadn't been losing sleep over loan documents and shadow lenders. But my real focus wasn't them. It was the staff. The estate had always been run like a quiet machine. Groundskeepers, housekeepers, the old cook who'd worked there since I was a child. They weren't just employees. They were part of the walls, the unseen hands who knew where everything was kept, who came and went, and what conversations slipped through open doors. If Mary and Mother had been meeting with Eldridge men, surely someone had noticed. I found my chance when I caught Marta, the cook, alone in the pantry. Her back was stooped now, her once dark hair streaked white, but her eyes still held the warmth I remembered from childhood. Marta, I said softly, closing the pantry door behind me. Can I ask you something? Off the record. Her hands stilled over the basket of onions she was sorting. She studied me for a moment, and I saw the flicker of recognition, not just of me, but of the little girl I used to be, who had followed her around the kitchen begging for scraps of pie dough. Of course, Miss Esther, she said carefully. I lowered my voice. Have you noticed strangers visiting? Men who don't belong here. Her brow furrowed, and she glanced toward the door as though afraid the walls might be listening. Yes, she whispered finally. They come at odd hours. Not like the lawyers or the surveyors your father used to meet. These men, they walk the halls like they own them. My heart clenched. How often? Too often, she said grimly. And your sister, she meets them late at night in the study. Your mother too sometimes. They send the staff away when they arrive, but I've seen enough. I leaned closer, my voice barely audible. Do you know what they want? Marta hesitated, then shook her head. I can't say, but one of them, the tall one with the gray suit, I overheard him. He told your sister, deadlines don't move just because you're scared. The word sent a shiver down my spine. Deadlines? What kind of deadlines did Eldridge Financial give people? Not the kind you could negotiate, I was sure. Before I could ask more, footsteps echoed in the hall. Marta quickly shoved onions into a basket, her face smoothing into neutrality. Mary appeared in the doorway a moment later, her eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of us. Catching up with old friends, Esther? She asked, her voice sugar-sweet with suspicion. I forced a light laugh. Just reminiscing. Marta was telling me how she used to sneak me extra cookies when Father wasn't looking. Mary's eyes flicked to Marta, sharp as glass. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but then she smiled, that tight, dangerous smile of hers. Well, she said, don't keep her from her work. She has enough to do. That night, as I drove home, Marta's words kept circling in my head. They walk the halls like they own them. Deadlines don't move just because you're scared. It confirmed everything Daniel had said. Eldridge wasn't just sniffing around the estate. They were inside it. And Mary and Mother weren't just partners. They were puppets being pulled by strings they couldn't control. But here's what struck me hardest. If there were deadlines, then Eldridge wasn't going to wait. Whatever they wanted from my family, the clock was already ticking. And if I didn't act soon, it wouldn't just be my inheritance on the line. It would be the estate itself. The next time I drove to the estate, I promised myself one thing: no more tiptoeing. If Mary and Mother thought they could hide behind polished words and staged smiles while strangers prowled Father's halls, they were wrong. I had to look Mary in the eye and see what she was willing to admit, or what she couldn't keep hidden. She was in the study when I arrived, perched at Father's desk like it had always belonged to her. The late afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, casting her in sharp relief, the perfect image of control. "Esther," she said, not looking up from the papers in front of her. "Back again? You've been visiting more than usual lately." I stepped inside, closing the heavy door behind me. "I've had a lot on my mind." Her lips curved into a practiced smile. "Haven't we all?" I walked closer, letting my gaze drift over the desk. Contracts, folders, a leather-bound planner. But what caught my attention wasn't the paperwork. It was the faint smell of cologne lingering in the room. Not Mary's perfume. Not Mother's powdery scent. A man's. The same one I'd caught a whiff of near the gates the other night. I let the silence stretch before I said evenly, "I hear you've been entertaining guests." Her pen stilled. Slowly, she looked up, her eyes sharp. "Guests?" "Yes," I said. "Strangers. Men in suits. Men who walk the halls like they own them." Her expression flickered, just for a second. Then the mask returned. "You've been listening to gossip again, haven't you? The staff here love their little stories." I held her gaze. "I'm not talking about gossip. I saw one of them myself." Mary leaned back in the chair, folding her arms. "So, this is a house, not a prison. People come and go. Mother and I handle business now. Not everything is your concern." My pulse quickened, but I forced calm into my voice. "It's my concern when the land is collateral. When outsiders are circling like vultures." Her smile froze, thin as glass. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said flatly. "Oh, I know enough," I countered. "I know about the loan. I know about Eldridge Financial. And I know you're in deeper than you can admit." For a heartbeat, the room went still. Mary's eyes flashed with something raw, fear. Maybe, before she snapped, "Stay out of it, Esther. You think you understand, but you don't. You've never had to manage this family, this estate. You've never had to shoulder the responsibility." Her voice rose with each word until it trembled at the edges. I stepped closer, lowering my tone. "You're not managing it, Mary. You're gambling it away. And those men? They don't care about Father's legacy. They'll bleed this estate dry until there's nothing left but ashes." Her hand slammed against the desk. "Don't you dare lecture me about Father's legacy. He left us with debts, with impossible expectations. Do you know what it's like to watch everything crumble while you stand on the outside, safe from the decisions that keep this family afloat?" I froze. "Debts." She wasn't lying this time. Her voice carried the ragged edge of someone who had been cornered. But debts or not, she had chosen the wrong saviors. "Mary," I said softly, "Father didn't build this place so it could be handed over to men like them. Whatever debts there are other ways. Better ways." She laughed bitterly. "Better ways? Don't be naive. Eldridge has resources we need. And if that means they have a seat at the table, so be it." Her words struck me like ice. A seat at the table. She wasn't just tolerating them. She was inviting them in. I drew a steady breath. "Then you've already given them more than you realize." Her eyes narrowed, but I didn't wait for her reply. I turned and left the study, my hands shaking, my chest tight with fury. Because now I understood. Mary wasn't just caught in their web. She was weaving it with them. And if I didn't act soon, she'd pull Mother and the entire estate into a trap none of us could escape.